Zentripz, EDM Radio Network.
We're calling this one Unfiltered UFOs. We're starting off a new phase in what we've been doing. It's not just coincidence or conspiracy tonight. Tonight it is unfiltered because we're talking about UFOs, aliens, and all things in between. This is Dood, and of course you're listening to the Zentripz Radio Network, and I would like to welcome my friend and one of my favorite artists on the planet, Mr. Shawn Nagle. How are you tonight, Shawn?
I'm awesome. Thanks for having me.
You are awesome. And, of course, the House Pirate and Play HD in the house as well.
How you doing?
That's the sound of his voice.
That's me.
So we're going to just jump right into it. I mean, as you know, Mike, I've been chomping at the bit waiting to get down to this. We got past the blood sacrifice and all the other... What else have we covered?
Oh, well, quite a bit.
Without going into detail.
We talked about the Boule. We talked about the black Illuminati a little bit. We talked about a lot. We covered a lot, definitely, and you can hear those on the Mixcloud account. So do a search for Zentripz.
Because we covered so many topics, but that's why I wanted to kind of get all that stuff out of the way.
Yeah.
And that's why we're not going to call this one coincidence or conspiracy, even though it's still kind of in the same hub.
Right on.
It's unfiltered.
Well, I'll let you know now that I'm going to sort of play the devil's advocate on this, because lately what I've been filling my head with has been
Cheese Whiz.
It's been sort of you know how like the rabbit hole, every time you kind of, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and you kind of tumble down it. And so for a little while, it seemed like maybe, you have a handle on what's going on, and then something happens and you have a breakthrough and you're like, wait a minute. That's kind of where I'm at. It's like at one point I was like, there's no doubt they're real and they're here and da-da-da-da. And I've kind of gotten to like a new perspective on it, so we can get into that a little bit. But I'm very curious to hear.
I like a lot of the shows and stuff, and a lot of the investigative stuff, but I don't really agree with the way a lot of it's presented. And as far as like everything, it's aliens, ancient aliens, as if mankind was so primitive and ignorant before. That there was only one kind of human being, and they were the only ones that had a brain, and they just happened to make cave paintings because they were on mushrooms.
Well, it is funny how they can balance every story on the tip of aliens. Like you can kind of back engineer every story.
And that's where my conspiratorial slant comes in on it. I think it's just a pitch to kind of perpetuate the thing, maybe the new world religion or whatever. Not saying that we haven't had interaction in the past, right? That they aren't currently visiting. I mean, it would be ignorant for us and quite arrogant to say that we are the only intelligent species, and to say that we're more intelligent than another species would be the supreme arrogance. You know, and all you have to do is look at our behavior and how things are, and art's a good place to see the influences. And again, it takes me back to the shows and stuff. But what I think is, and it's pure speculation because there are so many different theories and everybody has their truth, was that there was a global civilization, maybe multiple, and it's risen and fallen over the eon, following either the Kali Yuga or some sort of other pattern, or maybe we were here for millions of years. There were many different kinds of hominids, the cone heads, the blunt skulls, the Neanderthals, and they all intermingled, and much like Lord of the Rings kind of thing. And a cataclysm or alien invasion, whatever, something happened. And it's like we have this collective amnesia, and we don't want to take responsibility for who we are or that sort of importance. So we say it's aliens built this, or aliens had to build it. There's no way a human being could build that. And Shawn and I, we've had quite a few discussions about some of that. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think that a lot of times it's the easiest thing for them to go to, instead of it being that maybe our civilization at one time was able to do things like that, and whatever, like you're saying, something happened, thousands of years ago that changed the perspective of what people know then as to now.
So you think it's like a sensationalization and simplification, so they don't have to explain anything?
They're giving a quick, knee-jerk response answer. Oh, it must have been alien technology or whatever. It could have been assisted by that, maybe, but it's just right now. It's like everything's aliens right now. I think
it is.
And the funny thing about aliens, when you really get into it, when I'm going to mention things that you already know, is they may actually be interdimensional beings. They may not even be from another planet or another
That's
galaxy.
a very good point.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't think about that, but that's one thing that you got to realize is that it could be a different layer of civilization that we're living in and a different layer they're living in.
Yeah, and we're just coexisting, and we're just not tuned into their frequency.
Right. And
We
we're
don't
not-
have the hardware.
I think all these probabilities and possibilities exist in certain places. I mean, a lot of things intersect in this dimension that we're in. Those interdimensional beings, people from other planets, people from inside the Earth, people from who knows where.
Well,
Or-
if you
or
take
what?
that theory, right, of maybe an interdimensional thing, when we're seeing something, it could be a rip in that dimension. Or they have the ability to enter into our dimension and we can't enter into theirs.
Maybe even we get to the pyramids and stuff. Perhaps this is a theory that I have on that. You know, I guess I would have to actually do a lot of footnotes to back it up if I was writing it about it. But the pyramids kind of seem like they're like the gears or the hands of a clock, and the stone circles like Stonehenge and places like that are the time slots. That maybe those special alignments allow for that sort of dimensional connection or projection, communication. I mean, something like that. Why would you build something that just serves one purpose?
Well, that was one of the videos I watched recently talked about Leylines and the magnetic channels that run throughout the Earth and how there is a unusually high incident rate of holy like temples or shrines, or they're all almost without fail built on some sort of ley line.
And also built on pre-existing sites that were there before.
Well,
like who was there first?
That's what they suspect, is that there's some sort of, energy that people are tapping into.
Do you think there's more sightings along those ley lines?
That's
Are those power points?
That's a great question. Maybe, the ether or our fabric, our reality is a little easier to bend in those places, and so the
structures that are perhaps harness that energy and create a certain pattern.
Well, one of the things that I recently saw on the web that had my interest was the possibility of these guys being able to jump through the sun and using the sun as a portal,
Like the backside of a wormhole?
sort of, and they show some very sketchy, none of the video evidence that you'll ever see is 100% conclusive. It's always a little sketchy and a little,
Isn't it?
and you can, it's like I could easily do that with After Effects at home if I wanted to, so, but they show these little dashes, these little blips shooting into the sun and shooting out.
Yeah,
of
you
the
never
sun
really
and-
get the detail. Sean, have you seen anything like actually seen like a physical ship or a manifestation or maybe even an alien?
I seen a ship one time
Yeah?
when I was a kid in Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Interesting.
And I wasn't really sure what the hell I was looking at.
Was it a light or like a metallic thing?
It was a shape and then lights.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've had quite a few sightings.
No, that's the only sighting I've
Yeah?
ever had. And like I said, I was more like in shock. I was like, what am I looking at? And I'm looking at it and looking at it, and it's just like slowly going
Weather
away.
balloons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta
It was
remember, I was
light from
probably
Venus reflected off a weather balloon
I
off some
was probably
swamp
only
gas.
12 at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, your mind's a lot more open to stuff like that at
Right.
that point, too. Do you think maybe you've
Well, I
had...
was always busy looking for Bigfoot in the woods.
Who
He
wasn't?
he likes glazed donuts, evidently.
Yeah. And beef
So
jerky.
do I.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think you've had any contact, or do you know anybody that has, maybe? What do you think about that?
I don't think I've ever had any contact.
What-
Although sometimes I feel like I'm not from this planet, but
I think a lot of us that
Yeah.
have any outward side of intelligence feel that. You
Yeah.
could just feel that driving down the street trying to pass somebody on the left.
yeah.
You catch somebody with a handful of coupons in front of you at the grocery store, you feel like that.
They're definitely not from my planet.
I love when the girl hands me coupons and I go to her, I'm a man, I'm never going to use these.
Too much work.
think
I
at
won't
one
ask
time-
for directions, and I won't
Yeah.
use coupons.
Unless it's a beer coupon or something like that. Wow. I've been, I don't know if you would consider it lucky or not, but I've had about a half dozen sightings, and I've been fortunate enough to have somebody there with me to corroborate it, because I still have a hard time accepting that. I'm like, did that really happen? And I'll call my friend, and,
Well, that's
and
what
they're
you're
like,
saying. What I said.
yeah, they're like,
You're doubting yourself.
yeah.
Yeah.
And dude, I've told you 20 times. Yes, I remembered. Yes, it happened. You know, and it was, and each one has been different. I've only seen one classical like flying saucer, and that's when I was in Sedona in '94 with a girlfriend at the time, and that was pretty crazy. So when I was working in Myrtle Beach, I had never seen this particular thing before, but then I wound up seeing it like 2 weeks later on a show, and it was like a bright flashing red light, and then all of a sudden it's over, it's moved across the sky, and it's repeating this pattern, and it's covering too much of the sky too fast to be a jet, and it's too low and too big to be a satellite, and then it stopped, and then it went back the other way. And my friend freaked out and ran back into the store. There was at least 20 or 30 people watching us outside of the mall there in Myrtle Beach. So I've seen a lot of those, and I've experienced, I don't know, your stereotypical alien abduction experiences. And I've often wondered that, and I never really thought about that again until I was watching a show, and this guy was talking about the things that happened, and it was a flashback for me. It took me right to it. I'm like, wow, that happened to me. Have you guys had any of that where like you wake up like paralyzed or feel like there's somebody else in the room?
I did have sleep paralysis or whatever that is one time.
It wasn't ketamine though, was it?
No.
Okay, just checking.
I had that too, but they call that a K-hole. But no, are we on the air? No. Oh yeah, we're podcasting.
That's why we're podcasting.
That's right. Gotta love it. So
Space Cat.
I did have sleep paralysis one time where I was actually, I was about 13 years old. I remember waking up and laying on my bed and having the feeling that, oh my God, I can't move. And it was really almost like I had tricked myself into believing it. You know what I mean? And then it was like I kind of got stuck in that spot for a minute. And then, but it was almost just like I was playing a game with my head or something like that, so it didn't feel like there was an external force kind of pushing its will on me or something
just
like that.
Just couldn't move.
Yeah, it was just like there was like my sleep program, my sleep cycle had somehow gotten, interrupted or glitched out, and I was awake, but I wasn't fully awake.
See, I've had variations of that, but I've only had like 2 times where I actually couldn't move, and both of them I woke up with a lot of anxiety, sensing the presence of somebody else in the room. I've read all the sleep research on that kind of stuff. But as a child, I remembered seeing a face that used to come through the wall. And it would feel like somebody had me by my feet, and I would like levitate out from underneath the sheets going toward the foot of the bed. And I would go through the wall because I would feel the coldness of that. And then that's all I would remember. And then I would wake up. But right before that would happen, I would get like this ringing in my ears, and everything would go like, there would be like this hum and like a soft focus. And it felt like my thumbs were really big. And like my tongue was really big. My body was getting big and light like a balloon, but I was falling down into myself at the same time. And that's when the face would come through the wall.
Wild.
Yeah, and I didn't remember it till I saw that show, and it triggered it. And then it was so vivid, I had to, because my brother and I shared opposite ends of this giant room. And he's like, yes, it happened to him too.
And what part of the country was this in?
It was in Ohio. And it used to freak me out. And then years later, I had asked my father if he'd had any experiences like that. And I'd asked him because I had an incident where I was driving out west. I was in Wyoming. It was probably 4 or 5 in the evening. You can see the sun just starting to get that, okay, it's going to get dark in about an hour and a half. The next thing I know, I wake up sitting on the side of the road. It's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm sitting there in the pitch dark on the side of the road. Car is still running. And then I asked my father about that, and he goes, well, I was going to get hypnosis to do some past life regression, but, now, and he started thinking about that, and that's the last he wanted to talk about any of it. And he suffered from sleep paralysis as well.
There's something that both of you said and I said. In these incidents, we doubted ourselves.
Why do you think that is?
Who's to say that that's not their ability to do that to you?
That's true.
To make you not
even believe yourself.
You don't believe it.
Yeah. What if it's because somebody in your family line, like your great-grandfather, somebody, or your grandfather signed up for the military, that like you signed away rights to your whole family line, and it's not really aliens coming to get you? it's some governmental body, or it's the part of the secret government to test you.
You know, it's funny you should say that, because
who else would stick stuff off your butt and then disappear, right?
No, that kind of dovetails nicely into my sort of perspective, or the perspective that I've been exposed to lately. There's sort of two sides to, because when a long time ago, I read a book by Carl Sagan. It's called, and it's a great book if you're listening and you're interested in something that will kind of help you cut through a lot of the bullshit in this world. It's called The Demon Haunted World by Carl Sagan. Science, there's a subtitle, Science is a Candle in the Dark.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's a fantastic book. And one of the things he does in the book is he gives you what's called a skeptic's toolbox. And, gives you the ability to objectively and scientifically look at a situation and figure out what the motivations are, figure out what the forces that are working on, and sort of objectively apply different scenarios. And, would this create this result? Yes. Okay. Well, then that's a possibility. Would this create this result? Yes, that's a possibility, or no. And so then you can throw that out. And that's what he developed. You develop this skeptic's toolbox, he calls it. And so over the last couple of weeks, some of the videos that I've been watching on the web, they talk about how, there's and I mean, I'm sure you've seen the clips of like Ronald Reagan talking about, the
what if an alien force?
Exactly. And then one of the other clips that I saw recently was Bill Clinton on, I think it was like the Jimmy Kimmel show or one of the recent late night shows.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about, like it was like, I think he was going into office, or he was just coming out of office, and he was like, so now that you're in office, can you tell us any secrets? Was kind of the idea of the conversation. And he all but said that aliens are real.
Right.
I mean, he was just
which
like,
is probably why the only tool in a skeptic's toolbox these days is a hammer.
They all look like nails.
I actually saw that interview. What he said was the classic. He said,
I'm not saying it.
He goes, it's not that I know there's aliens, but how could there not be when there's galaxy upon galaxy of different planets that could be somewhat like our planet that has a life form that could live on it, and maybe it's different than us.
Yeah, he kind of said something to the effect of, we would be very full of ourselves to think that we're the only ones.
Which we are full of.
Well, which one of you guys, without a doubt, which one of you was it said that maybe we can't see them because they're on a different frequency or a different? Was that you, Shawn?
Yeah, Sean's suggestion.
I was just talking about how they probably have the ability to intertwine through the different dimensions, but we don't.
Well, let me pose this to you. When the first ships like Captain Cook and people's like that were exploring these islands, and they've never seen white men or ships like that before, and they couldn't see it, but the shaman would see it in a vision and see it coming, and then it was there on the horizon, but nobody else could see it because they'd
see the wake was one of how we know that, I don't know.
Yeah, but they could not see the ship because it was not in their
reference.
Right. So he would initiate them through psychotropics, psychedelics, whatever, to get these people. And as more and more people saw it and woke up, then suddenly they hit this critical mass, and everybody could see it. Now, maybe the government, even if they came out and just said something, maybe it's all these different scientists and generals and people saying that we're going to maybe hit a critical mass. And it's not going to be so much that they're just going to start landing or coming through the dimensional doorways, but suddenly everybody's going to wake up and oh my God. And they live when the signs go on.
I think I might, when I see some of the cartoons that they show for my daughter and stuff, I think every cartoon has its version of we're helping the aliens, or aliens are helping us.
Oh, yeah.
Or, it's like some little episode where the aliens come down and they have their own ship, and so it's like
except on American Dad, he just is.
Yeah, he just lives with an alien.
Yeah, does all the depraved stuff.
Yeah, like Alf, but in cartoon.
To the cat eater.
But
speaking of ketamine,
but it's kind of like the same thing with computers. We'll have the first generation coming up, and I think they're pretty well established now that just like you and I don't know a time before TVs, and our parents don't know a time before radios, or maybe knew right when radio came around. we're just now having the first generation of kids that, like my daughter can work an iPad better than my parents can most of the time.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like 3.
I have a friend that has a 5-year-old that figured out how to unlock her phone and start calling and doing stuff. She's set up all her own stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy.
My kid's a teenager, and he is so tuned in to any and every gadget. I have to go in because he's got plugs and wires going everywhere in his room. He's like, don't touch them. I know what's connected to everything.
Right.
And he's got literally every gadget. It's just...
Yeah. But so that my point is that what is kind of to, agree with what you were saying or chime in on what you were saying. Maybe
that shift is taking place.
That's part of the shift is that, there's like, it's kind of permeated the culture from day one, so.
Well, it's interesting. And I've got Walking Dead. They had a very similar conversation at the end of this week's episode, which I know has nothing to do with aliens or conspiracy, but the fact that the younger generation grows up with a certain, this is the way reality is, they're more well adapted to it and they just take to it naturally.
Right.
It makes me wonder because the acceleration of all this stuff, what's going to happen? I mean, if you tell a teenager, like you say something about aliens, you're like, yeah, so what? There's aliens, big deal.
Yeah, right.
So what?
That's why there's no more real alien investigation. There's no more real, quest for mystery. And that's why so many of the shows, I don't even watch half of them anymore because if I have to hear another story about Roswell or Kecksburg, I'm going to want to, I'm over it. We all get it. We get it. Something crashed in Roswell.
Right. They didn't want, that's a big.
And that's what everybody goes to. And it's like.
Well, you and I have also talked about how, they'll throw a bunch of things at you. Okay, aliens crashed, right? And then all of a sudden they'll say, no, it was dummies that we were testing, the currents and the weight and balances of how long, whatever story they come up with.
There's 5 or 6 different versions.
And then they'll throw you 3 other things. So now you have so many misleading things, you don't know what's really real
Separate
anymore.
the wheat from the chaff.
That's classic government.
Oh, yeah. Information mixed with disinformation.
Right. Exactly.
Disinformation.
And it's hard to tell which is which because they hit you with so much of it at a time.
They'll literally give you 15 options, and you pick out 12 of them and put them all together. And
why do you think that they're giving the aliens, on one hand, you've got the endless alien invasion movies, okay? Which, if you take it to a deeper core, it's the same story theme with zombies, with anything. Good versus evil, and we triumph, and all that other stuff. And then on the other hand, you have it where they're involved in comedies where they're making them benign and even friendly or benevolent. So you've got this one side to give them that authority. You have to be afraid of them because they're so advanced. And on the other side, hey, but they're your friends and they're going to take care of you and they're funny and they just want to
saviors.
Yeah, they just want to bang hot chicks and And I don't know if it's a desensitization. And then you take that and you add to the fact that through Sitchin and other writers, they're trying to say that the elite that run this planet are part of the DNA hybrids that are descended from them. Maybe it's all just an elaborate ruse and a setup for us to accept them willingly as our elite leaders as they step out and go, hey, see these guys? They're from outer space. They created our bloodlines. Therefore, you're beholden to us. Just like the kings, divine from heaven.
Yeah.
And that might be also why they don't want us to really know.
Yeah.
Because then they're they live. They're shining through the glasses,
Yeah.
So
I think
it could be that.
I think you're right.
Right.
So maybe it's just like a small percentage of these, let's say, negatively polarized entities or ETs. They're influencing the minority that run this planet, and they've managed to consolidate that power. That's yet another possibility.
Yeah.
No, there's one thing too that we got to really, look at this in a realistic way. Like you take our culture, just our planet in general, how many different types of people there are, and how some of them are super violent, some of them are very, calm and docile, stick to their own, and then there's some that's got to get involved in everybody's business.
Yeah.
And judge what they're doing because you should be doing what I'm doing. Why are you doing that?
Right.
Now, who's to say that there
That's the good way.
Who's to say that there isn't aliens?
Right.
That are exactly.
And if we're part of this greater matrix or holographic universe, and if you follow the Hermetic principles, as above, so below, and it's a fractal, a holographic universe, then that pattern is going to repeat itself, in dualistic terms, in a third dimensional reality, perhaps maybe in a fifth or sixth or seventh dimensional reality where the energy is different or the physical laws are different, then maybe it doesn't work like that, But who knows? I think that any of these realities are possible and probable depending on what you're tuned into and what your life intersects with.
I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. And, I don't think there's any... I think the debate is coming to an end as to whether or not something's happening. The question that still remains is, who's at the bottom of it?
Yeah.
And if it's aliens, then are they working with our government, or are they working, sort of covertly, subversively, without, as kind of a fraction, or, are they peeling off portions of our government, and prepping us for,
maybe just an infiltration.
Yeah, I mean,
every show that's been about on TV, that's been a TV series, has been about infiltration or any sort of shifting in their appearance where they're infiltrating. It's never really lasted more than a season and a half, if that.
Don't you remember that movie Heavy Metal, where the politician that movie was done in the 80s?
81, I think, or 79.
I think it was 79 or 80.
That's a theme that has been going on. The aliens are running our government.
Oh, yeah.
From back then. So it's you got to wonder. So, again, the question is not, is there something going on? The question is, who's at the bottom of what's going on,
or who is at the top? That all-seeing eye.
Who's at the top for better? And there's two sort of explanations that I keep running into. One is that, I guess three. The obvious one: they're aliens. The aliens live. They're real.
It's like they live.
So so that's a fact, and that's one of them. The other scenario is that the government is creating these aliens as the new version of a straw man, sort of like, the ultimate
or
ISIS.
The next religion?
Yeah, exactly. Well, in an effort to galvanize...
Okay, I got you.
Right, in an effort to galvanize everyone under one. And so these sightings are supposedly... very well orchestrated and done in a fashion with a purpose, for the purposes of creating, the illusion that aliens are here, so that we'll maintain a state of panic and a state of fear, and
those are so many speculations, but you and I have experienced enough altered states of reality and had enough connections with those things you may meet in a shamanic journey that are alien-like intelligences. It's my favorite alien exits the studio. It had those alien intelligences, but also I've had enough experiences where I'm in that semi-lucid state of my awareness before I did any of those things. And I experienced a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That leads me to believe that there is some sort of contact.
Well, here's the thing, and I'm glad that Shawn brought it up initially, because it really boils down to it. Because the other explanation that I've kind of been wrestling with in my mind recently is that the aliens are here, the government's working with them or not. Fractions of the government are definitely working with them, is the idea, whether all of the government, whatever. But the real story is that they're not aliens, that they're fallen demons and Nephilim, and that they have fooled humans into, and so this goes to interdimensional beings. Technically, a demon is just an interdimensional being, so that still doesn't negate any other explanations. It just, and so when you talk about our experiences that you and I, we've separately had, and ones that we've had together, and psychedelia and stuff like that, even in the internal astronaut experiments that I've carried on in myself, the jury is still out to me as to whether or not what I'm experiencing is a spiritual journey, or is it some sort of contact.
Right.
Is it some sort of physical contact, or some sort of reality contact, or is it just
another part of yourself?
That's always a possibility.
I think you just set Shawn off on that one.
I want to comment on what you said about demons. Okay, did this ever come to you that maybe our history of saying demons and monsters and things like that,
It's a label.
could actually be aliens that have come here in the past, and that's the perfect way to describe.
100%.
In an ancient time, you would say some demon came in my room, and
Especially if it was so different from what
Right.
you're used to seeing, and you
like
have
the
no
succubus and the all those different demons.
yeah, and you have no real way to explain what you're seeing.
Like even if you take the whole thing, like if you go into religion, you take the whole thing with angels with wings. Okay?
Right.
Now, maybe that's the way ancient man felt that he could describe someone that could fly.
Right.
They may have
fiery
actually-
chariots.
Right, exactly.
Well,
It falls into that. And in my personal opinion, that's my...
I feel the same way about the
Right.
religious text and the way they describe
Right.
stuff.
Oh, I definitely think that they had a misunderstanding, and I think that the simple-minded, their simple-mindedness made them easier to control.
Well, what about, here's yet another hypothesis. Okay, let's say that we did have this global civilization, but they were so far advanced in intelligence that they knew there was a big shift coming, or a cataclysm, pick your cliche, end of the world scenario. And they, like our governments today, go underground or off-world to avoid this catastrophe. 2-3 generations later, maybe even 5 generations later, the dust settles, the radiation's gone, plants are starting to grow, people are living in the mud, in the jungles, very tribal. These people come out of the ground in their helicopters or spaceships with their machines, whatever, to educate the muddied masses. They plot the earth, what's going on. They go to the stone things that they set up to see, okay, this is where we were, this is where we are based on these alignments, and they start remapping everything and educating and rebuild these pyramids, rebuild these civilizations, because all of them have the same myth, that they came from
There was a great flood.
a great flood, and you wonder how the other ages ended. And but those also follow the Kali Yuga, the great cycle, the end of the Mayan cycle. Said we're coming out of the last ring of hells. Also, as we're coming out of that last bad part of the Kali Yuga, or I can't believe I just forgot the name of the book that it's in. Anyway, it's a 26,000 year cycle.
Yes.
The great cycle being 52,000 years.
The Great Procession.
So who's to say that these weren't aliens at all, but just us coming out and re-educating and recolonizing and restructuring, and the people that are running the planets are the same bloodlines and the same people that
The mole wizards.
There you go. And they're going underground again. And it's like a big ant farm or a termite colony that gets knocked down and then it gets built back up.
Well, I tell you what, the library at Alexandria, the burning of that library
really set us back.
Yeah, that I can imagine.
I think that was done on purpose, just like so many other things that have been done to set mankind back and keep us from our true roots.
Somebody found a bunch of, I saw a video, somebody found a bunch of scrolls or ceramic. It was part of they surmised that it was part of the library at Alexandria there that got burned, and they were able to scurry away with these pieces, and they saved them, and then this guy found them in like a cave in the middle of nowhere. I heard about that recently. I thought that was pretty interesting.
I have to check that out. I've heard about the Copper Scrolls and the Sumerian clay tablets, the Akkadian and Babylonian clay tablets. But the Sumerian ones are the ones that go more into detail about the gods actually walking among the men. And if you study any of the Vedic culture from the early Rama Empire, they have, lists of kings that go back hundreds of thousands of years, just like the Sumerians do. And they have detailed descriptions and blueprints for their flying ships.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? The fact that there's places all over the globe that still have tremendous radiation obviously was a nuclear blast there. You have vitrified forts all over the Scottish and Irish Isle, that's stone turned to glass.
That's proof.
That takes a lot of power.
And it could have been a meteor strike. It could have been nuclear weapons. I mean, who knows? But if you read the Vedic texts, it talks
mostly
about
nuclear.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. Seems like history repeats itself because the same people keep playing that over and over.
Yeah, and it's replaying, but it could be at different levels, meaning like they may have had, new capabilities, but it's not what we have today.
Right.
In other words, you can't apply what goes on now to what was going on centuries ago. It could be the same thing, but very different from what we know it. Also, in the way that you take technology now, back then it would be more like magic.
Yeah.
They'd be like, oh, this guy can do magic. He makes water turn, he can have gold attached to a piece of wood using water and and citrus,
Right. People are very superstitious,
Right.
especially when they're ignorant and uneducated.
Right.
And I see our society kind of moving back toward that. You combine that with being told that,
Idiocracy.
that, yeah, and throw the alien factor in there. They're here to invade, but they're still your buddies. And you could parallel that into the way our culture is right now and the way that, we could be perceived as the evil aliens invading another culture and destroying them.
It's so true, Tom, and I'll tell you why I totally agree with that. Because if you look at our society right now, people are more involved in worrying about a sporting event or, something that's just so non-important than the reality that's in front of them.
Oh, yeah.
And there's so many other things you could utilize your mind for rather than wasting it on, nonsensical garbage, which we do.
We're the new Rome.
Pretty much.
Yes,
Right.
we are.
I mean,
Yes,
that
we
pattern is going to repeat, except I don't think we're going to last a couple thousand years like
Yeah,
they did.
that-
But, if you really think about it and you follow who's really running the planet and follow the money trail, the Vatican, Rome is still running the planet. They just don't have armies doing it. They have other people's armies doing the work for them.
I was about to touch up on that. If the Vatican accepted the existence of beings on another planet, usually with their track record of taking everything at face level after
And
100
co-opting
years,
it.
right. I'll believe that one, just because they finally accept.
They're positioning themselves to be the divine intermediary between aliens.
I had a friend of mine one time. He's very religious now. I don't know what happened to him, but he wasn't before. And he talks about the box that once you become, part of them, the Pope, they show you what's in this box. And he always joked and he said, "I think it's an alien's head in there."
Quite possibly.
And
could be.
it's like they all, well, and I guess recently the Vatican's actually even acknowledged that there probably is alien life forms.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I heard
Well, you've
that.
got so many
That's
astronauts and scientists and generals and former prime ministers that are saying, yes, they're here. The United States government's been lying about it forever. You got the head of Skunk Works coming out and saying that's where we got all our technology from. We copied them. Werner von Braun was even quoted as saying they helped us.
Well, the Scientology, I think the whole religion is based on a concept of aliens somehow interfering with us.
Oh,
I'm not a Scientologist or in no way back to Scientology.
I'm a level 5 mind head.
There you go.
Keep it together.
I follow Marvel Comics.
That's good.
The paradigm that they purport is something to the effect of these spirits are doing battle throughout the galaxy, and there's like a handful of main spirits, and I think they call them phaetons.
I don't know the details, but I do know they have some sort of alien.
Well, they believe that when you do bad
Aspects of
things,
their religion.
you've
Isn't the
been
Mormon
sort
God
of
an alien too?
Possessed
Yes.
by
I think so.
a phaeton.
So
And they have different levels.
what if we had a
that you-
Scientologist presidential candidate running against a Mormon presidential candidate? Which alien would win?
And they have different levels, like cloud levels. Like if you were a certain, good person, you would go to the higher cloud level. You're classed even
You're
when
in
you're
cloud
dead.
9.
Wow.
You're
Yeah.
in cloud 9.
What a hierarchical bag of bullshit
right?
for dogma, man.
Well, just as a side note, I did go see the Book of Mormon recently over at the
For the musical.
Yeah,
How
the
was that?
musical. It was really funny with the part that I thought was really interesting, and I'm still on the fence as to whether or not the guys Matt and Trey did this themselves or was it the Mormons. When we walked up, we were Tiffany and I were kind of in conversation, and I saw these guys standing, and they were dressed nice, and they're standing out there in front, and the guy kind of interjected into our conversation and was like, "Hey, are you going to see the Book of Mormon?" And I was like, "Yeah, we're going to see the Book of Mormon." And he goes, "Here it is right here," and shoved a little book at me. And I was just like,
That wasn't Orgasmo, was it?
Have you heard the good news?
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm all good with that. I'm okay. I didn't take the book, but somebody pointed it out to me. Maybe those were plants from the. I mean, I wanted to tell them. They're making fun of you guys. In the whole play is making fun of how
Well, I find it
interesting
that quite a few religions are based on extraterrestrials.
Well, yeah, you could. Yeah, it's like a magic
And you can
trick.
interpret other scriptures as that's what it's being. Now, I've read the Lost Books of Enoch, and I also recently read a book called, not recently, but a couple of years ago, Uriel's Machine. And it is all the conversations between Enoch and the angels that took him up. And he names what they do, and he talks about the measurements for building this temple and all this. All these measurements are the measurements for Stonehenge and the pyramids.
Wow.
Interesting.
It's crazy. So I thought, wow, I'm wondering what about the rest of the pyramids? And I'm thinking, man, because I've been thinking that for a long time. Even before I shroomed on the Temple of Inscriptions at Palenque. I was thinking that. And lo and behold, somebody puts out a book called God's Machines. And it's all the pyramids with their harmonic resonance, their position on the grid, how they line up with the planets, and the energetic patterns that they create. And when I was, you need to go start the music for the show, man. When you're at a certain point, they all resonate at a certain frequency. You know how to do that, or?
I'll get it. I'll help him.
All right, cool. Well, Shawn and I will continue. See, that's what I like about it. It's very casual.
Yeah.
We don't. It's not like we're doing coast to coast. And we've got a timeline to meet. We can just kind of ramble
Tom,
on.
do yourself a favor. Look up, if you literally, I did it one night just to understand religions better, okay? Because I didn't want to talk about them if I didn't really know anything that, just talking about it like I heard this about it and that about it. I actually went online and researched a lot of them. And a lot of them are very alien based, meaning that we fell from the heavens to earth or were put here from something from the heavens. And if you just punch in whatever religion and just watch a video and they'll explain to you the basics of the religion.
The divine deity that comes from the sky.
And it's kind of fascinating because like when you brought up the Dead Sea Scrolls, if you read those, I mean, like all the terminology was eventually taken and made different, and every single religious, story.
When it was co-opted to be used to control or manipulate.
Exactly. Basically, our version of the Bible now was when it was pretty ruthless land, okay? And it was a good way to control people without having a law or guys with swords, shoving it into your back.
Oh, yeah.
So this way they could control you by saying, if you don't do what God says, this is what's going to happen.
Well, what's interesting, and talking way back in the Sumerian text, it talks about, and there's even a few mentions of it in the Bible, about the wild men that lived outside of Eden. And you think about, there have been so many different kinds of humanoids or hominids on the planet. I mean, who's to say that these weren't the genetic offspring that they used? Maybe Bigfoot's the missing link.
Well, actually, it's funny. You just read my mind, or we both sent it to each other. The one thing that people talked about when they first came to our continent is there was like these giant wild men. I don't know if you know anything about that.
Yeah.
And it's like the early version of what they may have thought was a Bigfoot. Or what it could have been, which it quite possibly could be, it was the early form of man that was just so big and powerful that basically anyone that came to this continent killed them off because they knew that there was no way they can compete with them, physically.
Oh, yeah.
And even maybe their animal tactics, like they could kill them all at night.
Why do you think that ties in with the giants that lived all over North America, that were white-skinned, 2 rows of teeth, and all that stuff?
And the funny thing is, occasionally people are born that way.
Well, and they say that because now the oxygen levels aren't high enough to support a lot. But back then, animals were larger because the magnetic field of the Earth was different. The oxygen levels were much higher than they are now. And they could support something like that. And I think that if you really think about it, we're really like a backwater kind of planet. We would be like the last tourist destination,
Right.
We could be a colony. Pick your cliche, but I've seen too many things to make me think that there's not some sort of interaction. I'm looking to make my off-world connection, and I don't mean with the fleet that's moored around our planet
Right.
that, what's his name, hacked a list of off-world ships and commands. which is another thing. I think that's really interesting that stuff came out about the same time that another guy had hooked a camera up to one of his telescopes and was taking pictures of these ships. Two unrelated things, both came out very close in time and proximity. And all of them, it just blows my mind now that I'm thinking about that.
I just recently was looking at a bunch of photographs. I wonder if they're the ones you're talking about. They might be.
They're kind of fuzzy, but they look like the ships from the starship from Stargate Universe.
I think that might be the ones I saw.
There was a switch over from the Stargate SG-1 to Stargate Universe when the Greys helped them build the ship.
Yeah. Now, did you? Something I noticed. It's funny how much they look like the stealth fighters.
Oh yeah.
They're very similar. Like they have the layers. It's like the layer of the wing. Like there's like 3 layers of a wing, kind of stacked on top of each other. Not that it's open, but it's like, I don't know why they do that. There's some reason for it. Maybe it displaces the air differently or whatever it does. But when I was looking at those particular photographs, that's the first thing that popped in my head is like, wow, it looks like the stealth fighters or the stealth jet, and it's like going back to what we were talking about, de-evolving technology where maybe the aliens have given us carte blanche to look at certain things and come up with a way to do our own thing based on their science.
I think that's a distinct possibility. Right. There's just so many. I've got all these images going through my head as I'm thinking about these. When I started tuning into the whole, we started talking about Stargate and the series. I really think a lot of that parallels how things really might be. Yeah. Teleportation, not necessarily time travel, because I think our history would be constantly changing.
Oh, yeah.
Because so many people would be meddling. Yeah. But I really think that teleportation and traveling to these other places, I mean, the ancients, when they would talk about, there was a lot of writings about how the priests would go into one pyramid and then appear elsewhere.
Right.
And I've been to some of those places. And unless those guys were 2 feet tall, there's no way they could get through the shafts that connected everything. And that's when I was at Monte Alban, they had these really narrow passageways, and they said this is how the monks would get from chamber to chamber. And after working on production facilities and stuff, it reminded me more of the channels where somebody would run cables or power lines. And the way that all these places were set up on these mountaintops really brought home the ancient astronaut thing. And going to Palenque, where Paco Vaton's tomb is, at the Temple of Inscriptions, and it looks like he's taking off in a ship, but they also say it's him being cradled and lowered into the underworld. And I really I didn't see that. That didn't make that connection. It looks like he's taking off in a rocket ship.
It looks like he's in some kind of a spaceship going off into...
And they claim that he wasn't from here, that he came here to teach.
Yeah.
And that he lived, 700 years or something like that? I can't remember. I mean,
well, there's been many that has that same storyline. But didn't they also have almost a launch pad near there too, where they think that's where a ship would go from?
Yeah.
I remember reading that too about that.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've got to get the other show started. I hope you enjoyed this. We're obviously have a lot. Every time we have one of these, there's more subjects that come up. So in any case, a little unfiltered action for you here. We started out UFOs unfiltered. Who knows where we're at now? Till next time, this is Dude. On behalf of everybody that's in here tonight, thank you.
Zentripz, EDM Radio Network.